Dag sê en hartlik welkom by Regheid met Robinson hier op Litnet. 'n Gespanne atmosfeer heers in Kaapstad tussen die metro en taksibestuurders en eienaars aan die ander kant. Die taksiestaking van 8 dae en gepaardgaande geweld het tot chaos gelei. Meer as 800,000 leerlinge kon nie skool toe gaan nie. Gesinne moes honger ly want kos kon nie afgelaai word by winkels nie. Ondernemings is geplunder en in skietvoorvalle is 5 mense dood, insluitende 'n Britse toerist. Honderde mense is in hegtenis geneem en aangekla. Die staking deur die Nasionale Taksiraad Santaco het ontstaan as 'n reaksie van die taksi-eienaars teen die metro se verskerpte optrede sedert begin Julie om honderde taksies wat die wet verbreek te skud. Soos byvoorbeeld dat die bestuurders nie rybewyse het nie of bedryfspermitte nie. Nadat 'n ooreenkoms bereik is oor basiese gronde vir die skud van taksies, het die metro se amptenare desnietenstaande voortgegaan en binne 'n dag weer taksies geskud. 'n Taksi-taakspan se werk om binne 2 weke oor 'n lys ooreen te kom van beskikbare oortredings is vertraag. Sentraal in die situasie staan die uitvoerende burgemeester van die Kaapstad Metro, Geordin Hill-Lewis. Welcome. Well, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much for speaking to us. What is happening in that task team now?
Thank you, Freek. Nice to be with you. The task team met for the first time again after the strike yesterday, and it was a meeting just of the City of Cape Town and the Western Cape government because Santaco declined to attend. So we started the work of drawing up the list of major and minor offences. Major offences will continue to be impoundable. Minor offences will move into a finable category. And
but this is a problem because it's a problem because if they're not there, then what is the use?
Well, that's the disappointing thing. They should have been there. They were not, and so we hope that they will, rejoin now that they have also launched their court application, which they've been threatening to do for months and months. And now I'm pleased that they are doing so. And let's see if what happens there.
But what in particular actually gave rise to this situation that they are not attending the meetings?
Well, they claim that the impoundments continued over the weekend in contravention of the agreement that we signed. Now, the fact is, I'm afraid that it is impossible to misunderstand what was agreed. What was agreed, and I could not possibly have made this clearer throughout the week, is that we would continue to implement the law. Impoundments would and will continue for the major offences listed under the National Land Transport Act, excuse me. And we said that on top of those offences, we would draw up an additional list of major and minor offences. And we would not impound for those additional minor offences. So that is absolutely in black and white and agreed to. Now, when 14 taxis were then impounded over the weekend for breaking the law, including 2 for jumping red robots and so on, then there was a big outcry from them. I'm afraid they are either misrepresenting. I can only imagine that they're misrepresenting because it's impossible to misunderstand what they have agreed to.
Well, the minister seems to not to understand, as you put it, because she demands that all the taxis must be freed immediately and that you're going beyond your powers and that you're going back on your word and the agreement that you've reached.
The minister does not have the power to demand that. She has no legal power to do that. And in fact, she is abandoning her own piece of legislation. We are enforcing national traffic laws called the National Land Transport Act, the NLTA, which empowers us to impound those taxis for the breach of any of their license conditions. And we have enforced that strictly, it is true, because we want taxis to be better behaved on our roads. And they are generally, not all of them, but generally very badly behaved on the roads. So it's amazing that she both seems unaware of what her own act, she's the custodian of that act, says, and that she would so readily take the side of taxi drivers and operators over passengers who need to be protected and kept safe on our roads. And that is why I said, slightly tongue-in-cheek, she is the Minister of Transport, but she seems to have become the Minister of Taxis.
But what is going to happen now?
Well, we've got to get the task team up and running. We've got to get Santaco to actually honor the agreement, come back to the task team and talk about the list of major and minor offences. Then we will stick to that honourably. We signed up to that deal honourably, and we will stick to it honourably. But if of course there's no agreement after 14 days, then we just go back to the status quo where we impound for every offence. So it's very much in their interests to come and negotiate that list of major and minor offences.
What is it that you specifically want to see on that list?
We have said that anything that impacts on safety, the safety of the passengers in that minibus taxi and the safety of other road users, that must remain a major offence that's impoundable. Things that don't impact on safety directly, like a loose, a flicker light that is not working or a loose side mirror, and things like that, that's fine. We can let those go. Those can be finable offences. But anything that impacts on the safety of the passenger and the safety of other vehicles on the road and their passengers must remain an impoundable offence.
What can ordinary commuters expect in the next week or two?
I think many of them would agree that they are badly treated by taxi drivers. Their safety is disregarded. Their lives are often put in danger by the behavior of the taxi industry. And that sadly, they have very little other option because the train system doesn't work in South Africa anymore. And our bus system carries a very small percentage of commuters. So taxis are, by and large, one of the only games in town. And that's very sad. But what it does mean is that we have a responsibility to protect their safety if taxi drivers will not. And so our message to them is that we will continue to act strictly within the law to protect their safety on the roads, and that they can feel at least some sense of comfort that they have a local government here that is doing that on their behalf. And so that is our commitment.
Well, there's also probably an opportunity now to look at the whole public transport system. And we're talking then about taxis, we're talking about trains, and we're talking about buses. Santaco actually said in an interview that I've listened to earlier that they don't want to see the buses that are half empty, idly driving around, and they get a subsidy of 1.2 billion a year, but they don't deliver the service. Is there some truth in their allegation?
Well, it's true that bus companies do get a subsidy, but they deliver a great service. Actually, buses are usually packed, and so they do deliver a good service. Taxis get a massive implicit subsidy in South Africa. They do not pay any tax. The public, to a large degree, funded from the national fiscus the taxi recapitalization program to buy all of those new taxis. So there are huge implicit subsidies in the system, even if they are not explicit. And the taxis well know that.
Many buses were torched, so their service must have been affected.
Well, whose fault is that? The taxi industry or rogue elements inside the taxi industry torch the buses to terrify customers and then complain that the buses are not full. That truly is, there's a certain irony in that argument. But the fact is, the bus companies, both My City and Golden Arrow, deliver a great service in Cape Town. It's just smaller than it only carries 15 or 20% of commuters.
But the fact that many of those buses were burned down, is that affecting the service that you must or can deliver?
Yes, it is. There were 10 buses lost. So it's we've got many hundreds of buses. So it's not crippling. But of course, yes, it does have an impact. Those buses are off the road and will be for a long time until they are replaced.
And those taxis that were impounded, what is going to happen now?
They remain in the pound, and they will remain there. The promise that I made to Santaco is that if they can bring evidence to me that a taxi has been impounded for a minor thing like a loose mirror, then I will help them to get it released. We strongly suspect that there is no such example, and we have not been presented with such an example yet. But my commitment remains. If they can bring me such an example, I'll help them get it released.
What about the minister? Have you asked any kind of meeting with her to actually try to clear the problematic situation between you and them?
I had a long meeting with the minister and the Premier, Alan Winde. When was that now? I think it was on Thursday evening. And, I think the air is cleared between us. I just said, so, we just fundamentally disagree on this matter. And I think that her piece of legislation, the NLTA, completely supports our view. But of course, she's the minister. And so if she wants to amend the law to make it less strict for taxis, she is welcome to do that. She must go through the parliamentary process. We will oppose that very strongly, and we will fight that in Parliament. But she is the minister, and she can introduce a piece of amendment legislation if she wants to. But the law as it stands now is absolutely 100% clear that we do have the power to impound taxis for any violation of their license conditions.
Have you asked the minister to actually go there to the impound vehicles and inspect them for herself?
I have done that. I've offered to take her there myself. What she will see is that it's not only taxis that we impound. We impound lots of private vehicles. We also impound a personal favorite of mine, something that I've actually been pushing for a long time. We impound vehicles that we catch illegally dumping or littering, so that there is a very serious consequence for those people who are caught in our city dumping trash on public fields and so on. We impound those vehicles now. We take them away. And I don't apologize for that. I think that's exactly what we should be doing, even more.
Would you have foreseen some of the consequences of the decision by either yourself and or Santaco, and the effect that this would have generally on the ordinary person?
I certainly could have foreseen that the taxi industry, as powerful as it is, would not take it lying down, that the law should actually start to apply to them. So a reaction, definitely, I could foresee that. You just have to, you have to try to manage those consequences as best as you can without giving in to the intimidation of violence. But there's certainly lessons that we have learned. For example, the way that they were intimidating food truck delivery drivers to actually try and starve people in townships. This is something that has not received enough attention in the national media. The way that food deliveries could not happen in the city because drivers were so intimidated, that there was a real issue with the availability of food in the last few days of the strike, and where the price of bread was escalating dramatically. That is so morally unacceptable and indefensible, and yet it has hardly been covered in the national press in South Africa. Now, for the last 2 days of the strike, we were actually offering police and law enforcement protection for food delivery vehicles so that they could make their deliveries and get food flowing around the city again. So that kind of thing, we've learned lessons about that people are prepared even to shut down the flow of food. We must make sure that we do not let that happen again in future.
Have you assessed the damage and who's going to pay for it?
The damage is massive. I don't have a figure for you, but it's certainly hundreds of millions of rands. But we certainly are going to take legal action against Santaco. And I know that when we do that, people are going to say, well, you're inflaming the situation again. But let me say that simply because we have reached a negotiated agreement does not excuse the criminality and the bad behavior and the violence, and there must be accountability for that. So we are definitely collecting evidence right now. for a civil claim against Santaco for the damages that were caused.
Now, looking at the overall picture again, the whole issue of trains, because apparently you could see now during this strike that the lack of proper passenger rail services is a big problem, and that's actually adding to the overall picture. So what is going to happen in that regard? It seems to me that you're picking a fight with the president on this issue.
Yes, well, if anything was highlighted in the strike is that minibus taxis have a near monopoly on public transport in South Africa. Not quite a monopoly, but probably 70% of the market, with the rest being picked up by what few trains remain, and then by the bus sector. Now, that makes them able to wield extreme power because they have that monopoly. Now, of course, as you alluded to earlier, they have also violently created that monopoly for themselves by actively destroying other modes of transport. But we can't allow that to persist for the long-term future. We have to get trains working. There's a limit to which buses can grow, but trains can carry many hundreds of thousands more people than they currently do. And that would really offer options to commuters. It would offer safety, more reliability, and definitely bring prices down for commuters. So I'm very determined that we must get the trains working again in South Africa and in Cape Town in particular. And the way that we're going to do that is by devolving the management of passenger rail from the national state to the local government, which is why I'm pushing so hard on that.
There was a report already last year about this whole issue, a white paper saying that there can be devolution of powers to the municipalities.
Exactly.
And that was actually agreed to by government. Is that true?
That's exactly right. And I'm so pleased that you raised that. That was in March of last year already, March of 22. There was a cabinet decision that devolution can proceed. And my frustration is that since then, since March of 22 to now, we have had very little progress on that front at all. There has just been basically radio silence. And so that is why I'm starting to push it more aggressively.
But the president says that you are threatening him and he's not going to stand for that. So are you picking a fight with him?
Well, we've written so many letters. We've had 2 ministers in that time. I've been in correspondence with 2 transport ministers. I've been in correspondence with the president, begging, pleading, cajoling, suggesting, you name it, trying to get a positive and proactive and constructive discussion on the go for train devolution. And with very little success, I must tell you, Freek. So this is why I'm now I'm turning up the volume slightly, and I'm going to keep doing that until we get an answer. It's not a threat, but what do you do when no one in government seems to even care about this issue? And as the point that I made is, when you ignore this issue, you're not ignoring me. I don't care if you ignore me. The president is ignoring 1 million Cape Townians who need the trains to work, and for whom it is not working.
But the minister has already indicated that she's not going to stand for this, and she's rejecting your demand.
Well, the minister is not the National Cabinet of South Africa. The National Cabinet of South Africa is the highest decision-making body in this entire country, and they have decided that devolution must happen. Now, until that decision is changed, then we proceed on the basis of that decision. The minister is just one voice. And I think, to be honest, deep down, the national government knows that they must devolve the trains because they can't fix it. They can't fix it, like they can't fix Eskom, they can't fix SAA, they can't fix the post office, they can't fix Transnet or the harbors. They have to get rid of it. And I think that realization is dawning on them.
And what is the ultimatum that you've put to the president?
Well, the law provides for something called an intergovernmental dispute, which is a very long process. So I'd really prefer not to follow that process, actually. I'd prefer to do this together, in a cooperative manner. But if not, then I have to follow the process set out in law, which is the dispute process, which forces us to go to a form of mediation. It forces the president to reply. And if not, only at the end of that, then you also still have the option of a legal recourse, a court process.
Yeah, but it seems something happened since last year to this year in terms of actually getting a working committee going. Do you think there's politics behind this, or why is this the case?
I really I hope it's not politics, because, as I say, there's 1 million people in the city that need the trains to run that can't use it at the moment. So I really hope that it's not politics. But if it is, then that would be deeply disappointing and morally indefensible. My favorable or generous interpretation is that it is just a government that is really struggling with capacity to do anything at the moment, frankly.
And what is your relationship with government, either with the president and or minister? Is it a difficult situation, making it difficult for you actually to make progress in this matter?
You know, interpersonally, one-on-one, we have a very good relationship. We get on with one another very well. But I get very frustrated when there's just very little progress from every national government department. It doesn't matter which one you mention. There is just very little happening. It feels as though the lights are on, but there's no one home. So that frustrates me a lot. And then I start to get, slightly louder and more assertive in public when you're not getting any progress.
Now, is this issue going to go to court eventually, the taxi issue now, and getting this going?
Just in the last few minutes, this is breaking news. We've heard that Santaco has finally lodged court papers. Remember that I've actually been inviting them to do this for months and months, long before the strike. I've said to them, if you have a problem with impoundments, challenge them. That is the way that in a democracy, in a constitutional democracy, you settle your disputes via court, not by burning things on the street. And so they should have done that a long time ago. I suspect that they will lose. We will obviously vigorously defend that case, because we know that we are within our rights in terms of the NLTA. But that is the proper and appropriate place for it to be challenged.
Unfortunately, the courts might not be the final solution, because, as you know, many institutions in South Africa sometimes ignore court orders.
Correct. I do agree. But then you must be quite vigorous about these things and go back to court and get a contempt of court order, like Golden Arrow Buses, to their credit, did last week, and obtained that contempt of court order against Santaco, and that opens them up to criminal prosecution for contempt, plus for the other things.
And thank you very much for talking to us. All of the best.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Freek. Thank you.